Letter 7, Excursions on the Lake, Manzoni's Ode of Cinque by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Yester evening there was a thunderstorm, and this morning the loftier Alps to the north are covered with snow, a sign that we shall have a boisterous wind from Calico until the snow disappears. This is the wind that brings heavy waves and renders the navigation of the lake dangerous. Desired to sail. I walked round to the bay of Belvedro and watched while he tacked in and out. I afterwards got into the boat to return, but it seemed to me that the little craft must run into the depths of the crested waves which met her. For the first time in my life I took thorough fright and insisted on our landing at the steps of the Villa River, the most dangerous thing we could do, for the waves might dash us against them, and the lake is fathomless deep in that spot. It is said who went down there was never seen again. We landed, however, in safety. The arrival of the steamer at noon is the event of our day. Several times acquaintance have come by it, chance visitants to the Lake of Como. When we hear the bell, my companions leave their books to run down to see the disembarkation. Today I heard one of them exclaim, "Ah, here's 500. This announced the arrival of a fellow collegian who joined our party for 2 or 3 weeks, to the great satisfaction of his friends. The snow is gone from the mountain tops. Warm, really warm weather has commenced, and we begin to enjoy one of the most delicious pleasures of life, in its way. The repose necessitated by heat during the day, the revival in the evening, the enjoyment of the cooler hours, the enchantment of the nights, to stroll beside or linger upon the divine lake, to see the sun's declining rays gild the mountain peaks, to watch the stars gather bright over the craggy summits, to view the vast shadows darken the waters, and hear the soft tinkling bells put by the fishermen to mark the spot where the nets are set, come with softened sound across the water. This has been our lot each evening. Each evening, too, at dusk, the girls from the silk mill close by pass our inn on their way from work to their own village. They sing as they go and look happy. Some of them are very beautiful. They are all well conducted, I am told, keeping sharp watch on one another. The unmarried in Italy are usually of good conduct, while marriage is the prelude to a fearful liberty. We have crossed to Bellagio several times without visiting the villas on that shore. Today has been excessively hot. At 5, a breeze sprung up. We crossed the lake and, landing at the port of Bellagio, went up the hill to visit the Villa Serbelloni. The extreme and narrow chute of the promontory that divides the lake into two is covered by the gardens of this villa. To the north, towards Cadenabia, the descent is somewhat gradual to the water, and the hill is cut into terraces planted with vines and olives. To the south, looking over the Lake of Lecco, it is abrupt. Dark, precipitous rocks rise at once from the deep waters, broken into crags and pinnacles, crowned with rich vegetation and adorned by majestic trees. Paths have been formed along the outmost brink of these picturesque precipices and ravines, and it is impossible to imagine anything more beautiful than the sight, looking down on the clear, deep lake, and its high rocky barriers, broken into gorges and watercourses, tree-grown and verdant. Tower in olden time had been built on the height of the promontory. It is now in ruin, and through this there is an entrance to a summer house that overlooks the deepest and most beautiful of the ravines, with its graceful wood. On the other side of the lake are the huge mountains surmounting Varenna, and softened by distance, the roaring of a torrent falls on the ear. The sound of a mysterious fountain, called, from its milky color, Fiume Latte, whose bed is full and noisy in summer, and empty and still in winter. The grounds of the Villa Serbelloni are peculiarly Italian. One path is cut through a cavern, and at a particular point, a view is caught of the opposite bank and of the Villa River, a picture, as it were, set in a frame. Descending terraces lead from the summer house to the water's edge. The gardens are not kept in English order, but art has done much in laying them out to advantage, and the exuberant richness of nature stands in place of trimness, which is not an apposite epithet for gardens in this country. There is a great deal of ground, the domain is princely in its extent, and in the grandeur of the natural beauties it contains. Its great defect is the absence of a suitable residence. In times gone by, this estate belonged to the ducal family of Esfandrati, whose escutcheons adorn the walls. The Esfandrati were a family of Cremona, and the name appears in the pages of Italian history. In Charles V's time, a Esfandrati was employed in various negotiations by Francesco Sforza, Duke of Milan, and was among the most distinguished of the followers of the emperor himself. Unfortunately, in those days, the Italians of Lombardy were patriots no more, for they had no longer a country. Francesco Sfondrati was named by Charles V, governor of Siena, and restored order to that distracted town, so that the Sienese named him father of their country. As Siena had always been a Ghibelline city, it may be supposed that the majority of her citizens looked favorably on the acts of a governor appointed by the German emperor. Sfondrati had married a lady of the illustrious house of Visconti and was thus connected with the reigning family of Milan. When he lost his wife, he entered the church. He became, first, Bishop of Cremona and afterwards Cardinal. The youngest of his sons was also an ecclesiastic and became Pope under the name of Gregory Roman XIV. He was known as an author of some works on jurisprudence, and besides, there exists a poem of his entitled De Raptu Helenae Poema Heroicum Libro Tres, published in Venice in 1559. Another member of the same family, also a churchman, made himself conspicuous by defending the pretensions of the court of Rome in answer to the declaration of the French clergy in 1682, and was, as a reward, made cardinal. Nor is the name Serbelloni much less illustrious. This family was originally Burgundian, and 3 brothers of the name left France during the anarchy of the reign of Charles Roman VI, when the factions of Burgundy and Orleans and the English invasion distracted that unfortunate country. One brother established himself in Spain, another at Naples, the third in Lombardy. One of the descendants, Gabriel Serbelloni, was particularly famous. Had he supported a good cause, he had been a hero, but the Italians had ceased to be a nation and fought for France or Spain as circumstances might direct. Gabriel was a knight of Malta and fought against the Turks with reputation and success in Hungary. His military skill and prowess introduced him to the notice of Charles V, and he invited him to enter his service. He fought in Germany and Brabant and acquired a high reputation. The most honorable circumstance attending his career occurred when Don John of Austria undertook his famous expedition against the Turks. This prince refused to sail till Serbelloni was added to the number of his generals. Everything that was most illustrious in Italy and Spain made a part of his expedition. The inimical fleets encountered each other near Lepanto. The greater number of the generals, both Spanish and Italian, were for avoiding the conflict, the Turkish fleet having greatly the advantage in numbers. Serbelloni alone supported the opposite opinion. Don John yielded to his arguments, and Serbelloni, by his subsequent bravery, as well as by his counsels, was a chief cause of the victory. It was in this battle that Cervantes fought and lost his hand. It is one of the most famous naval combats in modern history. Serbelloni was rewarded by the Viceroyalty of Sicily. He was employed on other occasions of difficulty and peril against the Turks, and was made prisoner at one time and exchanged for 36 Turkish officers of rank taken in the Battle of Lepanto. He reaped a better glory when named lieutenant by the governor of Milan. The plague broke out in the city, and the governor abandoned his post. Serbelloni remained and exerted himself by wise and humane measures to alleviate the horrors of the time. He was again chosen by Don John to accompany him in his last campaign in Flanders. He was with him when he died, nor did he long survive him. A more recent Serbelloni, probably grandfather of the present representatives of the family, served under the Emperor Charles Roman VI, and distinguished himself in the wars of Italy and more particularly during the 7 Years' War. He was afterwards appointed governor of Lombardy. I can scarcely explain why I send you these details. These grounds are so attractive, their sites so romantic, the name of the Sfondrati sounded so dignified to our ears, that we have been hunting for information with regard to them and their successors. I send you a portion of the result. 2 brothers now remain of the Serbelloni family, one a general, who served during the wars of the French Empire, the other a church dignitary. Both are childless, and the estates will, on their death, be inherited by their sister. Probably in ancient days, all the habitation that existed was the ruined tower on the summit of the promontory. The escutcheons on the walls show, however, that the present villa was built by the Sfondrati, but it is much out of repair and quite unworthy of the grounds, being little better than the house of a fatter or steward. The plan of a new residence on a splendid scale is under consideration, as well as the completion and ornamenting the grounds. But the brothers discuss and can never come to one mind, so things remain as they are. This evening we crossed again to visit other seats on the opposite bank. Villa Melzi is a very pleasant country house. Its marble halls and stucco drawing rooms are the picture of Italian comfort, cool, shady, and airy. The garden has had pains taken with it. There are some superb magnolias and other flowering trees, but one longs for English gardening here. What would not some friends of mine make of a flower garden in Italy? How it would abound and run over with sweets. No potting and greenhouses to check, no frost to decimate. The Italians here know not what flowers and a flower garden are. After loitering a while, we ascended the bank by a convenient and wide flight of some 80 steps and reached the Villa Giulia, whose grounds look upon the lake of Lecco. It was all shut up, as we were late. We found our way, however, across the promontory to a little harbor on the water's edge. Surely on earth there is no pleasure, excepting that derived from moral good, so great as lingering, during the soft shades of an Italian evening, surrounded by all the beauty of an Italian landscape, sheltered by the pure radiance of an Italian sky, and then to skim the calm water towards one's home, while the stars gather bright overhead and the lake glimmers beneath. These delights are, indeed, the divinest imparted by the visible creation, but they come to us so naturally as our due birthright that we do not feel their full value till returned to a northern clime, when all at once we wonder at the change come over the earth and feel disinherited of and exiled from its fairest gifts. The weather is now delicious, yet at times a cloud is spread over the sky, and wind and rain threaten us. This evening I had the pleasure of finding that I had not become quite a coward, and that I feared for P more than for myself. I crossed the lake with Mr. The wind rose, and our little sail was hoisted, but the waves rose with the wind, and our craft is so small that a little breeze seems much. However, I had been scolded, and had scolded myself for my timidity, and would not now display even prudence, but went on. And though 20 times I was on the point of proposing to return, I did not, for I was not aware that my companions silently shared my alarm. At length we had nearly reached the opposite side of the lake. The wind and waves had both risen, and if they increased, danger was at hand. I did not feel fear, but I felt the risk. At length Mr. said, "I think we might as well return," and at the word we tacked. It was a side wind, and our skiff was apt to make great leeway, which would take us below Cadenabia, and heaven knows where we could land. Just then the wind fell, and danger passed away, but the waves continued high, and the sail grew useless, while sculling became fatiguing. It was hard work. At last we reached the port of Tremezzo, and getting a boy to row the boat back to Cadenabia, we gladly walked home. The moonlight nights are most inviting. I spent several hours on the water this evening. We put out just at sunset. When we reached Menaggio, the full moon had risen above the mountain tops and strewed a silver path upon the waves. Instead of returning, we rowed along the shining track towards the lake of Lecco. We hunted for the tinkling fisher bells and loitered delicious hours away. This evening I heard for the first time Manzoni's ode on Napoleon. Strange, I had never before met with it. It was now repeated to me. It is a glorious poem. The opening calls at once the attention. Its rapid sketching of events is full of fire, the recurrence to the poet's self noble and appropriate, and the last stanza instinct with charity and pious hope. The hero, with all his faults, was fitly praised in verse as majestic as ever yet a poet wrote. It is a double pleasure to find poetry worthy of its better days spring up in modern Italy, showing that the genius of the Italians survives the blighting influence of misrule and oppression. The more I see of the inhabitants of this country, the more I feel convinced that they are highly gifted with intellectual powers and possess all the elements of greatness. They are made to be a free, active, inquiring people, but they must cast away their dolce far niente. They must learn to practice the several virtues. Their youth must be brought up in more hardy and manly habits. They must tread to earth the vices that cling to them as the ivy around their ruins. They must do this to be free, yet without freedom how can they? For the governments of Italy know that to hold their own they must debase their subjects. They jealously bar their doors against all improvement, and every art and power is used to crush any who would rise above the vices and indolence of the day. I love the Italians. It is impossible to live among them and not love them. Their faults are many, the faults of the oppressed, love of pleasure, disregard of truth, indolence and violence of temper, but their falsehood is on the surface, it is not deceit. Under free institutions, and where the acquirement of knowledge is not as now a mark inviting oppression and wrong, their love of pleasure were readily ennobled into intellectual activity. They are affectionate, simple, and earnestly desirous to please. There is life, energy, and talent in every look and word, grace and refinement in every act and gesture. They are a noble race of men, a beautiful race of women. The time must come when again they will take a high place among nations. Their habits, fostered by their governments, alone are degraded and degrading. Alter these, and the country of Dante and Michelangelo and Raphael still exists.